Parks Committee meeting for June 9th of July 14th of 2020. The first item on the agenda is the June 9th, 2020 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes of the June 9th meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. The first item under administration is item number 2 on the agenda is the cancellation of the Alive in Roswell events. And I'll let Chris Ward give you the information and the recommendation from staff. Chris?
Good evening, everyone. Due to the ongoing increase in COVID cases in Fulton County and the overarching concern for the safety of our vendors and sponsors, city staff and attendees, and the point that this event is very large. It attracts at least 5,000 people each time. There's not one point of entry, and there's really no way to continue to monitor social distancing. We are recommending that we cancel the remainder of Alive in Roswell for 2020. That would be August, September, and October.
So is there any questions regarding this item from anybody? Do I have a motion for the cancellation of the remainder of Alive in Roswell?
I do have a question.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
No problem. My fault. So my question is,
Sometimes they won't work.
Thank you. So my question is, how much lead time do you feel is necessary to start one up? And the reason I ask is I know typically we start in April, but really just hoping, praying that things end up getting much better, and we don't know when that will be. What I'd encourage is just to understand at what point could we end up saying that, okay, things are great, and in 2 months we'll be able to start up Alive in Roswell, something along those lines.
So there's just not a real easy answer to that, but it takes about a month for me to notify everyone and kind of get up and running, because there are things like banners and ordering the porta potties and all that kind of stuff to just get it up and running. Also, coupled with that, when we get our sponsors and our vendors, we make certain arrangements with them as far as we'll have T-shirts and we'll have a lot of promotion on banners and we'll have things on LED boards. I'm not sure at this point whether we can give back to those sponsors what they have kind of agreed to early on with us. We've done a number of things, which I'm happy to go over with you. We did a survey monkey to all the vendors and sponsors and asked them those kind of questions. If we were to come back, would you like to? They would like to, but they realize there's a lot of safety concerns. We also asked if we cancel 2020, would you want your money back or would you like us to keep it? The answer overwhelmingly was, please keep our money and hold off for next year. We also did financially, I looked at some things financially. Right now, we've refunded quite a bit of money, both sponsorship dollars, $43,000 in sponsorship dollars, and about $12,000 in vendor dollars. To do the next 3 months even, it would cost approximately $30,000, and that is basically what I have left right now. So there's a number, overarching is the health, obviously, but there's a number of things. We'd have to really look at it month to month. Right now, I was refunding yesterday, so each time we cancel, we get more people that say, hey, I think I want my money back. So it's not a simple question because there's a lot of factors. There's financially what we kind of owe our sponsors, the agreements we've made for them. But simple answer, 30 days. It's like, I don't like to cancel any time after 30 days.
Councilor Palermo, if I may add to that, part of the going into the decision at this point to just look at the rest of the year is the sponsors, some of the bang for their buck is they get to spread their name out over that whole summer. And they get a lot of exposure and all. And our main sponsor is still very much on board and is looking forward to next year. But to do something for just like a month at a time, they would rather see next year get focused on and really have that bang again. So that's part of the issue right now.
And that makes total sense to me. I guess the reason I'm asking is hoping things get better, end of the year, early into next year, whenever that time is. Even though we normally start in April, I'd love the possibility to have staff come back and see, maybe March ends up making sense.
Sure.
Obviously, safety is going to be number one, most important. But
We did
I'd
it.
like to add that we already stated that we could extend next year's season earlier,
Excellent.
Yeah, we asked about October and November, and they overwhelmingly were not really interested because the sun sets at like 5:30 in those months, and it would be dark. So I think starting it earlier is a tremendous idea.
Motion to move forward.
I have a motion from Councilmember Palermo for the cancellation of the rest of the year. Do I have a second? I have a second from Mayor Henry. All in favor, raise your hands. All right, thank you for that. I know it's a tough decision, but I think it's the right one at this point. Thank you, Chris. The next item on the agenda is request for guidance for our AmeriCorps grant. Megan Boynton from our grants division is going to talk to you. She heads up that grant program, and we're going into our third year now. She'd just like to give you some information and have a discussion on our path moving forward.
Thank you, Michael. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's down below.
On the PowerPoint.
There we go. Thank you again, Michael. Good evening, Mayor Henry, council members. I'm Megan Boynton. I'm the Grant Project Coordinator in the Grants Division of the Admin Department. I'm here this evening for the Grants Division to seek the committee's guidance regarding the intended City of Roswell AmeriCorps After-School Project Grant for fiscal year and academic year 2020-2021. As Michael mentioned, this grant is effectively now going into its fourth year because there was a planning grant that took place from 2017 to 2018, which was to collaborate with the Ed Isaacson Alpharetta YMCA and Star House Foundation on provision of enhanced after-school programming for local students kindergarten through fifth grade. Following the planning grant, the project continued with implementation grants in 2018, 2019, and the current year, 2019-2020. We also approached and received approval to apply for funding in 2020-2021. Approval was granted in January of this year. The application was submitted in February. Thereafter, however, the current project year changed, as did the outlook for 2020-2021. As you're aware, school sites locally, statewide, and nationally closed. School districts refocused on delivering education and essential needs remotely, and AmeriCorps member tutors, such as those in our project, were redeployed, subject to approval in new roles when and where possible. Currently, we are attempting to look toward 2020-2021 with our current partner, Star House Foundation. We know Fulton County School District is planning to resume in-person instruction, which is expected to include after-school programs, as I understand it. But that's subject to guidance from the Public Health Department. Regardless, we need to consider the potential repercussions for the project and its intended service delivery. In doing so, we need to consider the goals of the project and what onboarding and service look like. Basically, we look to recruit and enroll 24 members as AmeriCorps tutors, serving in 3 local schools. They would serve anywhere between August and May, which is the school year. They have a minimum service requirement of 300 hours, which affords them the ability to accrue an education award on completion of service. Onboarding includes the enrollment process with national service criminal history checks, pre-service orientation, CPR and first aid training, health and safety training, including mandated reporter training, which is virtual, but then training and tutoring, and the early literacy curriculum, which forms the focus of the program. There's routine follow-up throughout the service window and reporting to our oversight agency. But which then brings us to the questions around what potential factors will affect this project, the individuals and the organizations involved, what our options could be, and potential next steps. So I would open this for discussion to the committee.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate your work on this. In my opinion, there's not much more important, especially in the health situation we have now, for programs like this, especially should they become after school, because we've got parents who are trying to get back to work, likely, either two-parent or single-parent families, who not just need the time, but need the extra time with their children being educated. And so I would be in favor of continuing the program as you have, with the adjustments as you're discussing.
Is there any other comments or guidance? We just kind of wanted to bring this forward to let you see where we're at with this grant and what the challenges we have coming up. If you're good with continuing on, we'll be coming forward before long with an acceptance from mayor and council to accept the grant and then move forward if everybody's still good. I see a lot of shaking heads. So I think we have the guidance we need, Megan, so we'll just continue working the process as we are.
Well, and I'd like to commend you for the work you're doing, because I know how difficult it's been to meet the requirements of this grant, and you all have done a great job.
Yeah, really have.
We do appreciate that there will be challenges moving forward in the next year. We're not sure about how consistent things will be if the schools are called on to close again. But there's always, again, opportunity for redeployment. Certainly we can look at that if we need to. But yes, we appreciate that guidance.
Thank you very much for that. The next item on the agenda is item number 4. It is consideration of a resolution to accept the revised 2020 Home Investment Partnership Program grant. And then that also comes with the budget amendment in the amount of $278.88. And Charles Alford is our grants coordinator, is going to give you that information. Mr. Alford?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is just a resolution to accept a revised home grant through Cobb County and our participation in the Georgia Urban County Consortium. You guys approved a resolution for a home grant in the amount of $79,000 back in April. That was based off an estimate from HUD, similar to our CDBG program. They'll give us an estimate, or we estimate what we're going to receive, and then sometimes we have to come back and get the official award amount, and it differs. In this case, we're receiving an additional $25,000 more for the home grant. This basically can go to affordable housing projects throughout Roswell. This is not a resolution to allocate those funds. It's just a resolution to accept the money. What the plan is and what we do is sort of an unofficial application process. There's only a select number of entities in Roswell that is eligible for these funds. So we've done an unofficial application process every year, and we'll come back with projects in the fall. We have to have a project identified by the end of the year. So this is just to accept the funds so we can allow the mayor or city administrator to sign the grant agreement.
Any questions from Mr. Alford? Do I have a motion to accept for a resolution to accept the grant and the budget amendment of $178?
Motion to move forward.
I have a motion to move forward. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All in favor, raise your hand. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The motion was Councilmember Tyser, and the second was Councilmember Wilsey. Item number 5 on the admin agenda is consideration of a resolution. It's to adopt revisions to certain sections of the Roswell Human Resources Policies and Procedures Manual. Michelle Hunter from our HR Department Division will be going over these. This is something we do every year. Some of it is just general cleanup. Some of it is changes in the policies that we face throughout this year that we need to change in the policy manual. So she will talk to you about these changes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Michael said, some of these are legal compliance changes, some of these are just updates that we're doing. So I'm just going to hit some highlights as we go through, but happy to take any questions that you may have as we do that. One of the big ones, you should have a list of proposed changes. One of the big ones is obviously in light of our current situation, we are proposing a contagious symptoms and contagious conditions policy that just really kind of outlines how we would handle those should somebody come into the work environment that has any of those type symptoms. The second one, 2.2, in light of a Supreme Court ruling on June 15th, we are proposing to add to our harassment policy the general one in over chapter 15 as well, to include language that includes sexual orientation and gender identity, to include transgender status based on that ruling. Skipping over, and again, just putting some highlights there. Policy 10.7 and 10.9, we're proposing to change those so that instead of just being based on an 8-hour shift for jury duty and for bereavement leave, that we look at those actually based upon what some of our codes work. So a lot of our staff works 8 hours, but we do have a good number that work 10 and 12-hour days. So if you take bereavement, for example, somebody who's taking 3 days of bereavement on an 8-hour day gets 24 hours. Somebody who works 12 hours, which a lot of our police, for example, do, they would end up only getting 2 days of bereavement because it would be based on the 24 hours. So we're proposing to actually change that to 3 days, but keep it within the work schedule that they would do. And again, jumping over to 10.20, we are looking to add a administrative leave policy based again on some of the current events that we've had, just solidifying what that is and having that policy in our HR policy and procedure manual. 13.6. So currently, somebody who receives adverse action, an employer receives an adverse action, which we would consider to be a suspension, a demotion, a salary reduction, or a termination. They appeal that if they choose to do so to the HR director. We want to keep it that way, but then they can appeal those to the city administrator. The only one that we want to change in there was actually have it so that if somebody gets a suspension of 3 days or 3 work shifts or more, that they can appeal that to the city administrator, but a 1 or 2 day suspension would not be appealable. Of course, we would keep, or to the city administrator, we would keep a termination, a salary reduction, or a demotion being appealable to the city administrator. So we're proposing that change there. And then again, I mentioned chapter 15 where we would take the adding sexual orientation and gender identity based on the Supreme Court ruling. And then finally, I know I'm going fast, but 19.2, currently an employee cannot have another family member or a family member riding in a city vehicle, and we're proposing that change. What we find with a lot of our staff who do drive city vehicles is that, say you have a child, for example, they would take that child to school, they would go back and get their city vehicle, they would drive to work, they would drive back home, they would drop their city vehicle off, get their personal car, and pick up their child from there. So we're just proposing, as long as it's de minimis deviation from their normal route, allowing them with authorization either from their department director or the city administrator to have that individual in their car. There's some liability language in there as well to let them know that obviously they would be responsible should something happen to that family member in the car. So I know there's a lot of them, but are there any questions on any of those?
Councilmember Zapata, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, the last one, actually, the 19.2.
Yes, sir.
I would like to learn more about the liability aspect. I don't know if they will have to require to have insurance, and if they don't, they may have to be personal liable, but then obviously the city is more attractive for a lawyer than the individual. So yeah, I would like to learn more about the liability aspect of the 19.2.
So one of the things, obviously, talking with risk is if that is approved, we will have in the form that they're requesting to have a particular family member, there will be that liability language. We will tell them they need to carry their own insurance, but it will be a waiver that they're doing that they're actually signing. We haven't created that yet. We haven't drafted that particular waiver or that release to allow them to do that yet.
Okay. Thank you.
I've got some questions about 19.2 as well. And we've got an optics issue there. And I have had several complaints over the last couple of years about employees using city vehicles for personal use. One of them included an employee, I don't think he's any longer with the city, but he had gone to empty out a rental house in Doraville in a City of Roswell truck. The optics issue I've got is that we've got a city vehicle that's marked as a city vehicle, and you see a family in it. That's clearly not being used for work, clearly. So I would really like to look at this further, because I feel as though a city vehicle, being able to take it home, use it for work, and to and from work, I am all about that. I'm all in favor of that. But once we start introducing personal trips in it, I've got an issue with it. And then does that also include police vehicles, fire vehicles? So we've got a police officer that's got his wife and child in the car with him, and we need to talk about that further, please. Because I'm seeing all kinds of issues with that. That's not what our tax dollars are going for. And I'm completely supportive of taking vehicles home. I'm completely supportive of, all of the things. We always talk about the soft benefits. That's definitely a soft benefit. But now we're kind of diving over into the personal benefits, and that's where I have an issue. So I would really like to discuss that further.
Kaiser?
Thank you. Excuse me, I've actually read through all these. I have some issues that I'd probably like to discuss offline on 373, the second part. I don't have any issue with the first part, but I think there's probably a little bit of work that could be done on that to get to where I think we'd all like to be.
Okay,
So just mark that. I don't want to take the time now.
okay. Is there other comments or input at this time? So I don't know, I think there's some additional discussion or things that you may want from us back. Would you like for this, Michelle, is there a time urgency on when we do these? So if you're looking for, Councilmember Zapata, you have a question?
Yes, sorry. Yes. Also, I would like to learn more about the 3.10 rehire.
Yes, I can elaborate on that one. With the old, I shouldn't use that word, I'm sorry. With the defined benefit retirement plan, employees were not necessarily allowed to leave and then come back. They could only come back on a part-time basis. But now that we have the defined contribution plan, that is no longer a situation where they allow that, because they would allow it. If somebody left now that was on the defined benefit plan and came back on the defined contribution, they wouldn't be going out of the same plan. So it's just updating when we check with ICMA and GMA what their regulations actually allow us to do.
So let me ask you a question. So if someone takes early retirement and they are on our old plan, would that change their ability to come back and work full-time under a new plan?
No, yes, they would now be able to come back and work full-time, whereas previously they weren't able to do so, but they would be able to come back and work full-time and contribute to the new plan, whereas they couldn't prior.
So what would be the benefit to the city of Roswell?
We've had some folks that have chosen to retire that would like to come back that are.
Isn't that their decision?
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing I would like to mention to Councilmember Tizer about the,
373.
We've had a policy in the city for years that you can't supervise someone that's related to you. So that works in the police department, that works in Rec and Parks Department, that works throughout the city. And this merely includes elected officials, and it just goes to nepotism. So we'll get more information on it, but But that's where it's coming from. And at the time that we precluded city council or elected officials from allowing relatives to work for the city, it was because of nepotism. And at one point in time, luckily we don't have it anymore because a lot of it's because of our regulations. But at one point in time, we did have a lot of nepotism in the city. And there's a direct, in my mind, there's a direct conflict. So we as elected officials are at the top of the food chain. And so we can influence unduly any member of staff saying, oh no, well, you know, that's my daughter, you need to keep her on. That's my daughter, you need to give her work. So that's where this came down. So I just wanted to give you some of the background on it.
Thank you. I have no problem with the first part of 373 or what you're describing there. The issue I have is with the second part of 373, and I just want to make sure that we have that defined a little bit cleaner than it is defined now.
And from what I understand from our legal department, the language in the manual is a little sloppy. I shouldn't say sloppy. A little vague, a little, it could be interpreted several ways. Is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
So is there any other questions? What would be the pleasure moving forward with this? Councilmember Tyser?
So let me throw something on the table here. There were 3 sections that were questioned. What if we, in the interest of keeping things moving along, move along all of the items except those 3? And maybe you could bring those 3 back to the next meeting. At least we'll get you further along in the process.
I believe they were 3.73, 3.10, and then
19.2.
19 point, whatever, 19.2?
310.
Yes, sir, 310, 3.73, and 19.2, is that correct? I think.
With,
Is that a motion?
without objection, that would be my motion.
So we would have the motion to move forward with the changes that have been made other than 3.73, 3.10, and 19.2. Is there a second?
Second.
Let me, clarification. Are you proposing that we're moving forward with the other amendments to council for a first and second reading and not these and these come back? Or are you proposing that we bring these back for discussion and then move them all forward?
I'd like to move forward to council all of the ones that we clearly agree upon and have no issues with, and then bring these 3 back to council, and we'll take those forward after we're all satisfied with those. I just don't want to hold them up.
I would suggest we do them all at one time. But
Yeah, totally believe it's more efficient because if not, we have to go twice through the same process with 2 different set of items. I don't know if there's anything urgent here that you recommend that we need to take action immediately, or is something that can come back to the next meeting altogether and move forward altogether.
I'd suggest we keep them together, so I won't support the motion.
That's fine. If nobody's interested, I'll withdraw the motion.
Well, I have a second from Councilmember Judy, unless you want to amend your motion.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter if just bring it back. That's
All
fine.
right, so we'll bring this back to the next admin committee meeting, and we'll have the detail on these 3, and then if there's anything else you see along the way, if you can let us know, we'll prepare for those 2 when we come back.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, yeah, so we got the first second, let's vote on that. All in favor of bringing it back to the next admin committee meeting, raise your hand. Yes, it's unanimous. Councilmember Palermo, was that unanimous to bring that back? Yes, that's unanimous, thank you. So we'll move into the finance section, item number 6. I think Ms. Hura, our budget manager, Harpreet, will be giving a presentation of the FY 2020 fourth quarter budget initiative progress report.
this is a report on all the projects that the council had approved as part of the FY fiscal year 2020 budget. And we are just giving you an update as of the fourth quarter as to where these projects stand. So we'll start with the administration department. The total number of initiatives that we are reporting on is 13. And of those 13, 6 have been fully completed or substantially completed. 4 of them are progressing as planned, and 3 of them are delayed. And then on this slide, on the next slide, we have the list of all of the administration department projects. And you have the status on the right side. And then of the 2 projects that have been delayed, the ADA plan and the LED lighting program, these are the 2 projects that have been temporarily frozen due to the impacts of COVID-19. Moving on to the community development department, there were a total of 7 initiatives that we have been reporting on. Of those, 3 have been completed, 2 of them are progressing as planned, and 2 have been delayed. And the ones that have been delayed are the historic district property inventory mapping and the water resource map update. And these are, again, the 2 projects that have been temporarily frozen due to the impacts of COVID-19. And then in EPW, we have a total number of 12 initiatives, and this is across the 4 funds within this department. 5 of these 12 initiatives have been completed completely or substantially completed. 6 of them are progressing as planned, and 1 is delayed. And on the next 4 slides, you will see the list of projects. So these are the list of projects for the solid waste fund that we've been reporting on. These are the projects for the stormwater fund, and you can see the status on the right side. And then we have the 5 projects for the water fund. And then, of course, there's 1 project in the fleet fund that's been completed. And then similarly, in the fire department, we have a total of 9 initiatives, 4 of which have been completed, 2 of them are progressing as planned, and 3 have been delayed. And of the delayed projects, we have the Fire Station 5 remodel and the fire gate lockers, which have been temporarily frozen, and due to COVID-19 again. And then in the police department, we have a total of 8 initiatives that we've been reporting on. 5 have been completed, 2 are progressing as planned, and 1 project is delayed. And these are the list of projects here that you have with the status being reported on the right side. And I'd just like to mention here that the delayed project, the 1 delayed project, that's the unmanned aerial vehicle platform. One of the platforms has already been purchased by the department. There is 1 that they have postponed right now and have delayed it. So that's what's causing the delay on that one. And then in recreation and parks, we have a total of 19 initiatives. And I forgot to mention this at the beginning, that these initiatives also include the projects that had been approved as part of the mid-year budget amendments. So you will see the mid-year projects here in rec and parks that had been approved as well. So of the 19 initiatives, 12 have been completed. 6 of them are progressing as planned, and there is 1 project that has been delayed, and the one that has been delayed again is because that's been temporarily frozen due to the impacts of COVID-19. And these are the list of projects here. And the delayed project, as you will see, due to the impacts of COVID-19, is a landscape improvement plan at Oxbow Road, Roswell Area Park, City Hall, Groveway, and the East Roswell Park. Finally, we have the transportation department. We have a total of 17 initiatives that we've been reporting on here. 3 of them have been completed, 4 of them are progressing as planned, and 10 projects have been delayed. And of the 10 projects that have been delayed, we have 2 of them that have been 2 of them that have been temporarily frozen, and that's what's causing the delay in those projects. And this is the list of projects we have here. And then we have this other slide as well. And I'd just like to mention, actually, the Woodstock Street and North Coleman, the traffic signal there. I know that there has been construction going on, and I think it's almost completed, but I'm not sure about that. So that is all we have for today on this particular report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
there any questions for Ms. Horan? All right, I don't see any, so thank you very much, Harpreet, for that information.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda, item number 7, is a presentation of the FY 2020 fourth quarter investment report by Mr. Luckett.
Good evening, everyone. So as you might remember, beginning a few months ago, we started presenting to you all the quarterly reports for our budget report as well as our investment report. We recently finished up our second quarter, or the fourth quarter of our fiscal year. So this is presenting to you our investment report that wraps up fiscal year 2020. And just as a reminder, the funds that are invested, these are funds that have been allocated for particular uses, but because of just the timing of projects and timing of the needs of the funds, those funds aren't needed immediately. So they are free to invest and to try and maximize the dollars that we have available. And also as a reminder, that it's listed here on page 2 of the report, the City Council has approved an investment policy. And those 4 major priorities or principles are listed at the top of the report there. Safety is the number 1, ensuring that we avoid losses to principal. Compliance, that we're in conformity with federal, state, and local laws and policies. Liquidity, that we are making sure that we have enough cash on hand to meet the operating requirements as they come due. And then income, we're trying to maximize the amount of income that we can generate for the needs and the services and programs that the city provides. So moving on to the bottom of page 2 of the investment report, you can see that as of the end of June, our overall portfolio yield was 90 basis points, and we compare that to the 1-year treasury, which as of June was down to 18 basis points. And you can see, because obviously of everything going on, since January, the 1-year treasury has dropped 131 basis points. And for the city, our investment portfolio overall has dropped about 72 basis points since January. Moving on to page 3 of the investment report. Again, this just gives you, the top chart gives you an idea of how our portfolio compares to the 1-year treasury. And you can see that we're earning about 72 basis points more than our 1-year treasury benchmark. The pie chart at the bottom of page 3 also kind of gives you an idea of how our funds are invested across the different tools that we have available. Currently, the bulk of our funds are invested in Georgia Fund 1, which is our local government investment pool that is operated by the state. And the primary reason for that is over the last couple of months, as the economy has suffered some blows, and as rates have gone down, we've had quite a few of our federal agency bonds that have been called. And so we've had a lot of cash come back into the city, bonds that we had bought that weren't due to mature for another year or two. Because interest rates were dropping, those bonds, they were callable, so they were called. And so, as you might remember, a few months ago, we talked to you all about the idea of hiring an investment advisory firm for the city. And so the thought behind this was that as these bonds are called, instead of immediately going out for reinvestment, we would place these where they're easily accessible and kind of set those aside so that as we hire this investment advisory firm, we can work with them to try and rebuild our portfolio based on some of the guidance that they would provide. Other than Georgia Fund 1, we have about 20% in our bank. 15% is still invested in federal agencies, 13% in CDs, and about 3% in municipal bonds. Moving on to page 4, the table at the top there again further breaks that out among the $113 million that is invested. It breaks that out in terms of how that's invested in the percent in each of those vehicles. The chart at the bottom kind of gives you a 12-year history of the total amount that we have invested, as well as the different buckets that we have the funds invested in. And as you can see, we are kind of on the decline in terms of the amount of funds that we have invested. And this is the time of year where we are using up some of our cash that we've built throughout the fiscal year up until we move into our property tax collection time of year. Moving on to page 5, the top of this kind of gives you an idea of the overall liquidity of the portfolio, and you can see that of our $113 million that's invested, the average length to maturity is about a little less than a year. And then the section at the bottom kind of gives you an idea of the maturity schedule. And you can see, because we've been purposely setting aside a lot of these called bonds into our Georgia Fund 1 investment, local government investment pool, the bulk of our funds right now are in that 1 year or less category. We have some that go beyond that. Pretty much wraps everything up in terms of an update on our investments. The last few pages here just gives you detail of the different CDs and agency bonds that the city owns and the amounts of those. And I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Luckett. Does anybody have any questions for Ryan regarding the investment portfolio we have? I don't see any hands up, so Ryan, thank you very much for that information. Move on to item number 8. It's consideration to submit a loan application to the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority for the construction of a new solid waste transfer station in an amount not to exceed $3 million.
So we have talked to you all about this several times over the last couple of years, and most recently during the FY21 budget approval process. The solid waste fund budget included approval to move forward with the construction of the new transfer station. And I know that design is underway and nearing completion, and so it's time for us to come to you to request approval to apply to GFA for a loan for the construction of this new facility. Just to give you a little bit of information on the terms, currently the interest rate, we would seek approval for a 15-year term, which would equate to an interest rate of about 2.07%. However, because the city is a water-first community and is about to finalize that certification, the city would qualify for a 1% reduction in the interest rate. So that would qualify for us a 1.07% interest rate on this loan. Additionally, GFA charges a 1% origination fee. And of course, we'll be back to you once we receive any approval from GFA. That would come back to council for acceptance or approval of the loan before we would move forward. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you have on this.
Any questions regarding this item?
Ryan, I'm sorry.
Wait, Councilmember Tyson.
Ryan, what's the expected useful life of the transfer station?
I believe it's 20 years.
Is there any benefit to, or does GFA just not offer matching financing to 20 years?
They do offer 20 years. They do. I guess the thinking, we would pay a little more in interest by going out that long, but that's certainly an option that we could consider.
And one other question, when you say we qualify for 1% reduction, you do mean 100 basis points, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zapata, do you have a question?
Thank you. So will be 1.07,
Yes.
and then for the information, how much money the city has on the solid waste fund?
Our fund balance? I don't know that I know off the top of my head. I'm thinking that we were anticipating 3 to 4 million probably in fund balance. And as we worked through this during the budget process initially, the thought was that we would only finance a portion of this project. But as things have rolled out with COVID-19 and just the impacts that we've seen to the fund itself, we did want to just be a little more cautious. Nothing would stop us in the future from paying this early if we decided to. But we did want to be a little cautious at this point, not knowing the full impact to the fund from what's going on.
So no early payment penalties for
Right.
this kind of loan.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hall.
I just had a question. When would the construction start, and how long would it take? When would it be operational?
Mr. Skowski, can you help us with that?
Approximately this fall, if everything stays on track, we're about 70% design, so we'll be taking it to the bidding market early fall, and it's about a year construction, maybe a little longer than that, 18 months tops.
And we have an existing facility now, so we would be operating two?
No, we will operate
And is there a plan for anything in that place where it is?
Dan, you want to come up here where we can pick you up? Thank you.
So maybe the first question was just timing. It should bid this fall, and it'll take about 18 months roughly for construction. The old site is going to be immediately adjacent. You couldn't do much on that particular site because there was going to be truck traffic in and around it the entire time to get to the new station. But we do have plans for that space, and part of it is going to be used for stormwater requirements to meet the improvements as part of the design for the new facility. Does that cover everything?
I think so. Any other questions regarding? So I have a motion by Councilmember Wilsey to approve moving forward with the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 9 on the agenda is discussion of the occupation tax and the rates.
Over to Councilmember Palermo.
Excellent, thank you. So this was something I brought forward at the last committee, or actually now that I think about it, this is the third committee we've discussed it, because the first time there was the vote to have staff really just provide data on what are the commercial tax rates and business tax rates that are happening in the city. And I was very glad that, although not unanimous, a majority of this committee did vote to want to see at least what those rates were. In the last meeting is when staff presented a fantastic presentation on just really showing where our tax rates line up with neighboring communities. And so with that, after having some time to digest the presentation and some information, what I want to use this discussion for is an opportunity for information gathering. And so basically my intent tonight is not to request a vote, or not to, I personally won't vote for anything moving to council tonight, but I want the opportunity to gather feedback. And so what I want to do is I actually have an example proposal, and I'd like to gather feedback of thoughts, concerns, etc. With that, so I actually had a chance this week to speak with each council member briefly, one-on-one. And I felt it was productive. And one of the things that came up, not even really discussing this as a focus or priority, but one of the things that was brought up that I think makes perfect sense is what you'll see in my proposal is for the most profitable businesses, based on the NAICS code from the IRS, is to get them more in line with three cities that are really most similar to ours. And again, I'll show specifically what that looks like. But then I think I heard a great point, which is before moving anything forward to council or anything like that, we should look at what are the other potential costs of doing a business in Roswell compared to those three cities that I'm looking at here and comparing us to. So I think that's a great point, and that's something that I definitely would like to see from staff, and hope there'll be support to get that additional information. And so with that, that's one aspect. And then another aspect comes to is my focus here is purely on those most profitable businesses. I'm not supportive of increasing taxes at really any of the ones that aren't in those top profitabilities. And with that, I know a discussion, the concern that came up at the last committee, or perhaps it was one of the last committees, was wondering if really one of those the most profitable business is apartment landlords, and the concern that if they have their business tax increased, that's just going to automatically push to higher rent. And with that, and really just looking at the economics of it, is I'm quite confident that the landlords are charging rent based on the market rate. So if they had the ability to charge an extra $10 or an extra $50, they would do that. They're charging the rate that makes them competitive because, again, Roswell's not an island. They're not just competing with other locations in Roswell. They're competing in the metro area. And again, what you'll see is in that area where we certainly have a much lower business tax than the others. And again, what I strongly believe is, of course, all of these cities require service for their residents. And so when we have a rate that's 1/3, there's still the services occurring, so someone's picking up that tab. And what I believe is picking up that tab is residents of Roswell and is the lower profitability businesses. So that's my thought process on this. But again, what I'm hoping for tonight is not a vote, and I know there's potentially disagreement on what, if anything, should ever move forward, but it's purely data gathering. So with that, I'd love the opportunity to pull up just what I'm thinking and what I see as a proposal, and again, just any questions, concerns, anything like that, anything you feel would be helpful for staff to look at or this council to consider. Before we get into it, any questions or concerns?
Sir?
So, Mr. Fisher, I've not seen any of this, and I think it's incredibly inappropriate to drop something on me that I've not seen. You called me a few minutes ago. We had a quick discussion. It had nothing to do with a proposal, and I think it's completely inappropriate for us to not have seen it and have to react to something that we haven't been able to review. And so I would prefer that you let us look at it and then ask us how we feel about it.
So what
I just think that's just common courtesy at this point.
Well, I think what's totally appropriate is if what I'm hearing is there's a request that perhaps you don't want to give any comments right now, you want a chance to digest it, that's something I'm completely flexible with. But I think it's completely appropriate that if I have a proposal, I'd like to present it in public. I'd like to just have this public discussion. I believe that's what a committee is for. But again, by no means is anyone in the situation where if you have a concern or there's something that you want to think about more, it's not there. Again, as I said from the very beginning, I'm not pushing for, nor do I support any vote tonight.
It's inappropriate to ask me to have a public discussion on something that I'm not prepared for. I have no idea what's coming on this screen.
Correct.
I can't react to it. I have no discussion points. It's just it's an inappropriate way to handle this. I strongly object to it and object to the chair.
All right, thank you for that. Councilmember Zapata?
Thank you. So, well, a couple of things. One, I was planning to ask a technical question, but let's start first what is first. I think that learning and looking at the presentation of any council member, altogether 7 elected officials, we don't have the chance to do that because if not, we'll do quorum. We cannot meet in a coffee shop. We cannot meet in a restaurant. We cannot meet at the city council chamber offices. So I think it's a very great opportunity to learn from anybody. In the future, everybody, I think, should feel free to bring presentations to the council to learn. And then asking questions or don't ask questions is not mandatory. So it's up to anybody. If he has any questions, we'll ask. If not, no. If they have any comment, we'll make. Nobody's forced here to make any comment or ask any questions. And it's a great opportunity to learn all together here. You know, we always talk that we need to work together. Well, that is the environment to work together. Otherwise, we'll make a quorum outside this format. That is point number 1. Point number 2 is a technical question, actually. How often the federal government will update the NAICS every year?
And when you say
The profitability percentages, they will update these every year or every 5 years, or what is it?
that is the hope, but unfortunately, the data that is used, that has been used in the past, comes from the IRS, and they have not updated their data or provided that data publicly since 2013. So that ideal would be that we could update it annually, but we aren't able to do that because of the data source the fact that they haven't provided that annual update for us.
Okay, so have you seen in the past like big changes in any of the profitability percentages? Because what I'm asking this is because if this change will totally affect our tax rate. So if we don't keep up, let's say they increase, then might increase unfairly to the business in Roswell. Or if they decrease the profitability, maybe it's not fair neither for the tax rate in Roswell. So let's say that, I don't know, real estate and rental and leasing has 16.29. Maybe it was 40% before that, and then all of a sudden take a cut, which will have a huge impact into the tax rate in the city of Roswell. So it would be great to see, as soon as they update this and will impact our tax rate, then we need to bring this to mayor and council to review this and update either way, whatever the mayor and council feel like would be fair for the city.
Yes, and so we've only updated it once, and that's part of, as we use those new numbers, some of the different NAICS classifications did move into different tax classes because their profitability changed. And if that's something the council wants to see, we can definitely, as those change annually, if they do change, that could be something we definitely can bring back to council, just to share that with you.
Yeah, I think that it's important. I don't know if this should become a policy or something to be discussed with mayor and council and see if mayor and council feel like we need to review this profitability percentage every year, especially for the one that change. If they don't change, we just skip and keep going, but focusing on the changes.
Mayor Henry?
Well, I have a couple of comments. One is, Councilmember Palermo, in case you didn't know, I am a member of council, and you did not talk to me about a proposal.
I
You
did.
never called me about a proposal.
I did.
You never asked me to work with you on a proposal, to give my opinion on a proposal, and that's your prerogative.
I did, though. We
You did
talked.
not.
We talked.
You said you were bringing forward a tax reduction for apartments, or a tax increase for apartments, a reduction for restaurants. If that's your proposal, we'll wait and see it. However, what I would like to say is, there is something called consensus building. There's something called working together. And I don't understand what the issue is with us sharing information and saying to each other, this is what I'm looking at. This is what I want to do. This is where I'm going. What are your thoughts on that? And having conversations with one another. But, I agree. And Councilmember Tizer, I'm sure you remember a couple of years ago, I chastised you for doing the same thing. So, I've just got an issue. You can do whatever you want. I'm not stopping you from doing that, but I've just got an issue with the process and the way you are handling relationships with council members and me. So if you want to present this tonight, that is your prerogative. I am not going to vote on it. I am not going to comment on it. And we can bring it back to a future committee meeting.
Councilmember Zapata?
So I see action required, discussion. So I don't think that vote is expected tonight.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry?
Councilmember Judy?
I agree. I won't be having any discussion on something I first see this evening. And I also think that looking at raising taxes on any business during a pandemic, or even discussing it when people are just trying to survive at this point in time is inappropriate, and will not be discussing that moving forward anytime soon.
Councilmember Wilsey?
Yes, thank you. I, for one, last night we had an extensive discussion about the importance of bringing commercial business to the city of Roswell, and we enacted into policy some zoning laws that made it essential that that's what we're focusing on. So I, for one, am anxious to hear how increasing taxes on leasing office space is going to help attract business to Roswell and attract in raising taxes on businesses in the city of Roswell. So I just can't wait to hear what this proposal is all about.
Councilmember Tyson.
I have an objection in front of the chair that I'd like a ruling on. This has not been allowed in the past. It should not be allowed
multiple
today.
examples.
And it's entirely appropriate to send us this information. If you don't want to discuss it, that's fine, but at least send it to us so that we know what we're looking at and can prepare our thoughts. It's highly inappropriate, and I'd like the chair to rule.
And I just want to be clear. So Councilman Tizer, you're saying this has never happened in the past. So are you standing by that in your 2.5 years of council, never once have you voted on something? Or, no, I'm sorry, because I didn't ask for a vote. Have you never once seen something here, and many of us seen something here that had never been proposed before? Is that what you're saying?
I do not recall a council member presenting something that has not been shared. And whether or not that happened is not important. What's important right now is that we are not prepared, we have not seen anything, we don't know what we're looking at, we're just walking into it blind. It's just not right. It's not the way to operate. If you don't care to discuss it, that's fine. Send it to us. Send it to us so we can see it. Is that so much to ask for?
Councilmember Zapata, if you will.
Thank you. So, yeah, I understand we saw June 9th. This topic, I don't know if it was the first time we had the discussion on this on June 9th or before that, I don't remember. I do remember June 9th presentation from our finance department. So, so then saying that, again, I encourage any council member to bring to a public arena a presentation, an idea, or anything to have a collective. We always talk about working collectively, not individually, one-on-one, by email, phone, text, or whatever. And unfortunately, given that we cannot have a quorum, that here tonight is one of the few opportunities that we have to work collectively on brainstorming, on learning from each other, and sharing ideas for a presentation in this case. So I don't see a big deal of that. Actually, we're wasting more time discussing that Councilmember Palermo making his presentation. I don't know how long it's going to take. Hopefully not 2 hours. So I don't have anything to oppose. And if I feel like make a comment, I make. If not, I don't. And I just learn and move on.
Councilmember Judy.
Mayor, if we were going to have discussion, brainstorm, look at something like this, wouldn't it be appropriate to request a work session from you that you probably would give on something as important as this?
Absolutely.
So,
Committee is based on what you want to move forward to a council meeting. So work sessions are very appropriate.
We actually have multiple items where we don't move it forward, and it's not intended to. We actually use committees for informational items from staff as well as other different updates. So I think we have some differences of opinion on what the purpose of committee is. Again, my view on committee is it's a chance for us to gather feedback, to raise awareness, and it's a chance for it to all be done in public. And so I think it's absolutely crucial that the public does get to see what is the thought process, how does things start, because again, I have something that I want to discuss. As I mentioned, I'm not asking for a vote. I wouldn't support a vote, but this is a chance where next time this comes back, there's the option. All of our ideas might evolve. Each person might have good different ideas and build off of different ideas together. And again, it's something we've done consistently in the past, and I believe we should be consistently doing in the future.
in hearing the input that's been given so far in this discussion, unfortunately, Councilmember Palermo, I don't think you're probably going to get the discussion that you're looking for here this evening. I agree that any kind of proposals from any of the committee members is fine to come before the public. I think it should. I think they certainly have the right to see those things. I think the request here this evening is for that information to go out in advance, is what I'm hearing today. What I'd like to say is if we can get that out, your proposal out to each one of the committee members when we meet the next time, I think you'll get the discussion better that you're looking for. and give them the opportunity to be a little bit more prepared, and it would still be able to come out into the public and have the discussion at that point. Councilmember Hall?
I haven't seen a presentation either. I was looking forward to seeing this because Councilmember Palermo briefed me on it. But I believe that we're coming back, or part of this, and maybe it needs to be in a work session, is because we discovered through finance and through the questions that Roswell is not in parity in our occupational tax codes compared to other jurisdictions. And I believe that's what the ultimate goal
Okay.
is.
I think that would be an appropriate discussion to have at a time when we can see the proposal, if you can just get that out and have them prepared.
Mr. Fisher, I'm definitely seeing this as the majority's preference, but because, again, this has been a common practice before, I think it's been a very healthy one. I will respect this committee and just request a vote, and if that could be the official vote, that the majority says they don't want to see the information, then I won't say another word about it. But I think what my concern is, the bigger issue is we do have a split council, and there are very different viewpoints. There's some council members who've been nonstop fighting for developers and having a different view on the view of the residents and what's good for.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, he's off topic.
I think the main question is not whether or not we want to see the presentation or have it. It's just they want to see something in advance first so they can be a part of the discussion.
Which has not been the case historically.
Okay, I mean,
So, Councilmember Zapata?
thank you. It's a fair request, and I also would like to extend this to staff members. Every time that we are going to have a presentation from them, or a consultant, or anybody who come here to committee meeting to make a presentation, to be available in advance this presentation to these members of the committee.
Absolutely.
I think that will be a
That's why we
good
put agenda
business
packets
practice,
together.
not only for council members to do that,
Absolutely.
but also to staff and external.
Absolutely.
And external consultants when they come here to make a presentation.
Absolutely.
I think would be good. And sometimes the backup presentation on the booklet is not exactly the same that is presenting then on PowerPoint. So I will just extend this only to everybody.
Absolutely.
A new
Councilmember
policy
Tyson?
that I would certainly support.
So thank you. I would agree with that, Mr. Zapata. It's always good for us to have things and be prepared to have a robust discussion for the public. Having said that, my objection, and I thank the chair for your ruling, my objection really was about seeing a presentation that I hadn't seen before. There are a couple of things that I would like to discuss that we did talk about when you called me a few moments ago. And it goes to what Councilmember Hall brought up. Where's Ryan? Are you over there? When I look at the documentation you prepared and I see how we compare to other locations, what I don't know is if I'm looking at apples to apples. So I'll make up an example so you can understand what I'm talking about. Our business tax rate is lower than other places, but I don't know if other places, say, include their water or their trash pickup or something that we might include in another place. And that would be important to understand because I don't know if I'm looking at the exact same thing.
When you say include water, trash pickup, you mean included?
Service.
So other places have a business tax rate that's higher than ours, right? It's significantly higher than ours in some cases. Have they included things in that tax rate that we may include somewhere else?
No, because, that's pretty well governed by state law in terms of how the occupation tax can function and how it's allowed to be charged. So it purely, all that they can require is a pure reporting of their gross receipts. It even spells out, I think maybe there's like 5 categories of deductions that they're allowed to take. So that's standard from state law. It's nothing that we have developed on our own. It comes straight from the state. So I'm pretty confident that we're talking apples to apples. The only thing I would point out, and I think I sent this in an email to everybody after the last presentation, was that when we talked about some of the rates and how we compare to others, There were some cities where they had split the NAICS classification down further beyond what we had split it to. And so in that, they had multiple rates represented within one broad category. And so as we showed you how we compared, we had to make a decision how we represented that to you. And so many of the times what we did was either looked at the most predominant rate that we saw or the one that applied most to the businesses that we have here. So, we had to take some liberties to provide a comparison, but, I'm confident that it's fair and representative.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
So we'll bring this back. Councilor Plum.
That works. I just want to expand on that. So, or I guess a follow-up question. So, given the state law regarding profitability, that it has to be chronological, how is it that they can split it up further because they don't know what the different profitability is between those different ones?
So my understanding, because I did talk to a couple other cities about that, and my understanding is that at one time in the past, I think the IRS did provide that level of data down to that level of detail, but they don't do it any longer. And so they have, I believe these other cities that have some of this variation are still functioning off of that more granular level of detail than what we're using today. So that's why they're able to split it down to more specific level.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Thank you. And with that as well, and thank you for the expertise providing, because I was concerned if it turns out our rate's much lower, but it turns out their higher rate includes water, garbage, all these different aspects. So thank you for clarifying that's not the case. It is an apples to apples comparison. And also an interesting aspect as well, which everybody will see in the presentation next time, which is per business, it ends up being a very small amount of money, relatively speaking. And it's not until you total all the different businesses become larger. And so we all do, I think, or I hope, have the interest and motivation wanting to bring in office, bring in jobs here. And I think what we can absolutely see the last few years is to save a couple $1,000s, a year in gross receipt taxes is not something that's incentivizing, just these large offices to choose the different places, because we can absolutely see the ones that have the much higher tax rate. You can see some of them that actually have been bringing in a lot more of the office and those other things. But again, we can discuss that with the exact examples in the discussion next time.
All right, so thank you for that. We'll get this scheduled again on a upcoming agenda and have that discussion I think that you're looking for on your proposal at that time. So we'll move ahead now to Recreation Park. Thank you, Ryan. We'll move forward to Recreation and Parks. It's item number 10. This will be consideration to waive the FY 2020 fourth quarter rent payment for the Georgia Ensemble Theater in the amount of $10,205, and Director Leatherman will be sharing that information.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Ms. Farley is also here in the audience if there's specific questions related to GET, as well as our staff. The letter is included at a request from last fiscal cycle from GET and is a direct impact related to the coronavirus and the shutdown of the Cultural Arts Center. And in this case, when we closed the Cultural Arts Center, they had their final show in the spring, which they could not produce and execute because of the shutdown of the facility itself. And so as a result, they have requested that waiver of their fourth and final payment in the last contract cycle. Be happy to answer any additional questions should you have any.
Any questions, Councilmember Judy?
Sure.
That's where I was going.
Okay.
Just saying it's the right thing to do, and I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I have a motion from Councilmember Judy to approve the waiver. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
That's a tough choice.
That's a second.
Second by Councilmember Wilsey.
Thank you.
All in favor of this waiver, raise your hand, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Item number 11 for Recreation and Parks is consideration to move forward with the Discovery and Formation Committee to coincide with the beginning of the fall semester.
And apologize, there's like a section in that title that's missing, and this would be for the Youth Advocacy Council is the genesis of this conversation. And there's been a couple of discussions over the past few months on creating or having a discussion with this mayor and council on the formation of a youth advocacy or potentially a youth advisory council with the city of Roswell residents that could potentially advise both the Recreation Commission, potentially coordinate with other departments and this mayor and council on various topics or items that they would be interested in discussing. We had a conversation and a discussion with the Recreation Commission previous to this, just to get their kind of general input on different ideas that could be considered. And from that discussion, we've outlined a general recommendation, but really wanted to get some guidance from this mayor and council on how you would like to proceed with that potential formation commission or committee, and then eventually the formation of that committee in a formal manner. And the steps that I outlined in the staff report have just a couple of suggestions. Again, we're looking for guidance on this item. Also recognizing that school is going to be potentially the same, potentially a little bit different. We kind of just don't know what school is going to be like. Could be remote learning, could be in-person learning, could be universal remote learning, depending on what you hear in the news right now. Is to move forward, potentially have this committee attached to the Department of Recreation, Parks, Historical, and Cultural Affairs, assign a staff person, and then we would be searching for formation committee members in our community that would help to start to scope what this committee would look like and make recommendations on the formation to mayor and council. And in my mind, what the way that we've crafted that recommendation is to really engage the youth in our community on what is it that they would like to see for this committee, how would they want to see the committee function and work, what the membership would be like, and also help to foster that kind of process of how do you work up recommendations and bring them before an approving body like the mayor and council. With that, I'll kind of just stop and have any questions that you may have or recommendations. We can bring this item back and continue to work on it depending on what direction that you have for us. We've also included a couple of samples from different youth advisory committees in the packet to give you a general sense of what other agencies and organizations are doing as well.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I love this idea. I love the opportunity to engage youth. Is this something that you did in Sacramento when you were in California?
Not specifically in Sacramento. We had one in Southern California, and there was a number. I included the Youth Advisory Council from the city of Sacramento, which I was affiliated with by extension, but not with the county. They were with the city of Sacramento.
And what is the objective, the end game of the Youth Advisory Council? What do they produce and where does it go?
Oh, there's a quite a broad range, frankly, of things that they can get involved with. I look specifically to my department, selfishly, and think about what do we have coming. We have our 5-year strategic plan that's coming up. We have park development and master planning opportunities, and we would engage potentially with them in that advocacy and advisory capacity to get their feedback, and then in turn, by extension, the youth in our community's feedback, whether it be at their school or other neighborhood functions that they would potentially do. They can also look at opportunities like art and like culture that potentially they would like to either produce themselves. And I think we have a very convenient event that we do every day, Youth Day, or every year, and hitting that 70th anniversary is a way to tie in that Youth Advisory Council that we celebrate on an annual basis. We already have an event that celebrates the youth in our community, and we could potentially engage with this advisory committee on furthering the discussion around Youth Day celebration, helping us with our theme, helping us with setting up potentially what that next generation beyond the 70 years looks like for the future. And in the way that we've developed the recommendation with the youth kind of identifying what their priorities would be, presenting that to mayor and council, and then having that dialogue of other opportunities they can consider could be an opportunity as well.
Mayor Henry.
I've got a couple of questions, and let me just say that Councilmember Judy had brought this up to me some time ago, and I'm completely supportive of the initiative. I have been planning a youth advisory council for my office, and although COVID hit, so that's been put on the back burner.
Sure.
So I recognize the need to reach out to our young people, not only to get them involved in the community, but to get them involved in local government, and in your case, get them involved in recreation and parks. My question is, you referenced chartering here, which I don't really want to go down that road, and you also mentioned budget considerations. I don't really want to go down that road. And could you tell me, have you considered having this youth council be formed by the Recreation Commission? The Recreation Commission works with them, and then as the normal route, the Rec Commission and this youth council recommendations would come forward to council. So what I'm questioning is it necessary for mayor and council to get involved in this, because this is clearly a Recreation Commission issue? Sure. So have you thought about those?
We have. I think we wanted to leave the option open for this discussion, that if there were items beyond just what my department does, to not limit necessarily that advisory capacity or engagement capacity. We could certainly continue
This would be
to
clearly for your department.
Okay.
Clear.
Yeah, I mean, it is truly up to the mayor and council on what direction you would like to give us, and if you would like it focused solely in on our department and the work that we do, we certainly can form that process and move that through the Recreation Commission. And by extension, it would come up.
That's how I had envisioned it. It was a Recreation and Parks Youth Council that would opine on things like soccer programs, lacrosse programs, what we're using our parks for, how we want to use our parks. Do we want more ball fields? And it opens up the discussion because, as you know, when we master plan our parks and go out for the public comment, this is another layer of that where we can include the youth. But like I said, I see them as answering to the Rec Commission. I see them as being appointed by the Rec Commission, and any recommendations that they come forward with would go through the Rec Commission.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I agree with you. I think that in the discussions with the Rec Commission, it was kind of, let's bring this to council, get the blessing on formation of this, and go from there. I think two things that I see, actually three things I see is really exciting about this is one, you give them a project, which is the Youth Day Parade, and it's been around 70 years. I think they'll have some ideas that could really bring a different feel to that parade and make it better. And that gives them an overall goal. Two, government-wise, it helps them start to understand at an early age what the process is, and above all, cost. Because people don't understand what it costs to take care of a field, to build this. Well, we want a skateboard park. Well, all right, what's the land, what's the cost, and so at a very granular level is teaching kids government. It's something they're passionate about. And three, I think we could really get a good diversity on this, looking at many different sports, many different ethnicities, races, backgrounds, etc., and have a really cool feel that could emanate through the community. So I'm really supportive of this, and I do agree. I think this is a Rec Commission thing that I don't see any reason to usurp the system we have in place.
No, I just wanted to say I think it's a great opportunity to engage young people in middle school, high school age, and help us make sure that the parks and the activities that we're providing, to them are relevant and vital and can help be an important part of their lives, and that in turn, they'll be giving back to the community as well. So I think there's an opportunity for a lot of synergy here, and look forward to seeing what comes out of this effort.
Thank you. Councilmember Zapata?
Thank you. So, Mr. Lederman, since you have experience working outside the city of Roswell as well, how do you see this youth council working in other part of the country? And the pro and cons of them interacting directly with mayor and council, so we can learn directly without filter, or going through a filter and then going to mayor and council?
I think, you know, attaching it to the Recreation Commission has some advantages in learning the process of how to explore ideas and recommend policy to a group of community volunteers that can engage in coaching and advising at that level with the youth in our community. And it's a little bit less intimidating arena in which they can present, get good community feedback from people who are engaged within our community. And then eventually, when it's appropriate, like we do with the Youth Day, when we have the opportunity to engage with mayor and council, they're more prepared because they've done the work in advance to be able to make those presentations to mayor and council. Generally, I would say when you look at city and county governments, my experience has been the majority of the work is within the Recreation and Parks Department, because that tends to be the majority of the area of focus within the youth in our community. And so it's an appropriate place to attach that type of work. From the kind of the concept of filter, I don't necessarily look at the Recreation Commission as that filter. I look at them as that opportunity to learn, coach, teach, advise, and then support as something moves forward in the organization. And ultimately, similar to our committee items here or presentations to mayor and council, they're publicly available, and those can move through the process as necessary with the Recreation Commission. And of course, if mayor and council is looking for a specific topic to engage that youth advisory or advocacy committee with, once they're formed and up and running, that by extension of your Recreation Commission can be passed on to them as a request for information or a request directly from feedback for a specific topic. And similar to what we do is we can roll those recommendations and ideas up to committee or to council.
Have you seen any youth advocacy council members being part of the Rec Commission in any of the parts that you?
There has been there are examples of that where they're not a voting member of the Recreation Commission, but they're attached. And I'm trying to think of the word, and I just can't think of it off the top of my head. Where they're essentially a non-voting member, where they do sit on a committee or a commission and represent the youth at that location.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions regarding this? Jeff, you have the guidance that you were looking for?
And so in summary, what we'll do based on this guidance is I'll work with the Recreation Commission and we'll set a plan similar to what you have here moving forward and start to engage with the youth once we're back up and running and move forward.
Great. Thank you very much. Item number 12 on the agenda is consideration to approve Doc's Cafe location.
And I'm going to turn this portion of the presentation over to Dina Bush, our Historic Asset Manager.
Good evening, everyone. Just 1 second, if you do not mind. I'm going to pull up a short presentation. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Dina Bush.
So is here on the packet that I can look at?
This is a presentation you should have in the agenda packet, the report from VHB, which I am providing a brief synopsis of that report.
Packet page number 278?
That's it right there.
This one? Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. Okay, so what I'm doing tonight is providing details and synopsis on this initial report review from VHB. And just to start to add a couple of comments, whenever we discuss projects and have that conversation, it's important to be able to point to city vision, mission, and goals. And the juncture of the Oxbow realignment project and the conversation surrounding Ducks Cafe provides opportunity to work toward specific goals and vision. particularly when it comes to the conversation of building neighborhoods as well as access to historic assets. And it also speaks to, I would like to point out, the Roswell Cultural Master Plan as well. So this project overall, the conversation surrounding Doc's Cafe really started with the RDOT Oxbow Realignment Project, which necessitated the moving or the relocation of Doc's Cafe. And the Groveway community, of course, expressed interest in the preservation of the building, the structure, as a landmark interest. And as conversation continued to develop, yes, ma'am.
No. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to look for this presentation. I couldn't find it. No, the presentation, I'm saying the PowerPoint presentation, I'm asking.
So that was a synopsis of it?
This is a synopsis.
Quit doing the pages, it's rude. Quit doing the pages, it's rude. She's doing a synopsis of the thing that's in your thing.
Okay, so we don't have copy of the synopsis then? Okay, for the record, we don't have copy of the synopsis then. Thank you.
Really?
Tax staff again.
That's okay. So as conversation developed, the purpose of this project is to relocate and renovate in the future Doc's Cafe. And the overall aims is to foster that community partnership, particularly with the Pleasant Hill community, the Grove Way community, and with the future conceptual concept of perhaps turning it into a community center, and the overall concept that the inclusion of Doc's Cafe really does broaden that historic district story and raises public awareness for this structure. So to give you a status synopsis and a quick review of the background, Mayor and Council regular meeting back in January approved the VHB contract with a budget amendment of $40,000. And the VHB task order was executed in February. And this overall project that VHB was tasked with consists of 2 phases and 2 reports as deliverables. And we are in the middle of that process. So we have completed the first phase where they did their assessment. They produced their report, that very first deliverable. And what we're doing right now is I'm providing an update on that report as to what they have seen, what they have evaluated. But overall, the complete task order, that framework for the project, is 4 months. The first phase was designed to be 2 months, but unfortunately there was a little bit of delay due to COVID complications. And so we're, again, halfway. And this first phase was received in May 25th. We have reviewed with staff and with the community committee. And we're asking for guidance tonight as part of agenda item, and then, of course, further mayor and council review. So when you look at the report, we, in Recreation and Parks, Historic and Cultural Affairs, we provided VHB with 3 locations to assess as potential locations to relocate and move Doc's Cafe. And a site evaluation matrix for assessment was established, and part of that matrix, we looked at, or VHB looked at, proximity to community. And to be able to do that, Pleasant Hill Baptist Church, that location, was an assumed baseline when talking about the center of community. Issues of parking, utility, stormwater, water quality, feasibility, grading, pedestrian improvements or pedestrian accessibility, transportation, and any other potential threats that they perceived or they observed when they were looking at all the sites and evaluating all the sites. They were included as well as part of this evaluation matrix. So this is the map overlay that we provided to VHB, which basically just provides a good visual overlay of the Oxbow Realignment Project. You're probably all familiar with this. And it points out the current location of Doc's Cafe, which is directly off Oxbow Road. Part of the report, which you will see as part of your agenda packet, VHB did deliver back a draft report site location map just to document that. There are 3 locations that we asked them to look at. One is the Oxbow Road site where the structure is currently sitting. We asked them to as well look at Oak Street site, which is at the entryway of Waller Park. And then we also asked them to look at the Pleasant Hill site, which is at the juncture of Pleasant Hill and Oxbow Road. When they looked at Pleasant Hill location and they were assessing that location, they actually came back and suggested 2 options with that. And they divided the Pleasant Hill location into 2 opportunities. So they labeled that option A and option B. What you see now on the screen is option A. And the major difference between the 2 is placement of Doc's Cafe in the structure, whether oriented east or west of their proposed parking lot. So as you see on the screen here, option A, they are proposing that Doc's Cafe could be located directly east of the proposed parking lot, just right directly at the corner of Pleasant Hill Street and Oxbow Alley. When you look at option B, you can see it's just the complete opposite. They have proposed that Doc's Cafe could also be located to the west of the parking lot, closer to the back end of the existing gas station and closer to Atlanta Street. This I'm presenting is just a snapshot of their findings and their evaluation of the Pleasant Hill location, and this is for both option A and B. This is the closest location proximity to the community. It's 0.1 miles to the church and to the perceived community center. Parking, they state that approximately 8 spaces could be created, but with coordination of existing parking, they think that this will certainly be doable. When it comes to utilities, sanitary, storm, water, and power are available via the street. And this particular location, there's easier opportunity with the existing Oxbow realignment project. And zoning setbacks is just something we'll have to watch and take into consideration. When it comes to grading and walls, this location in particular, if you're familiar with it, there's going to have to be consideration of steep grading. Walls required for both parking as well as the building pad itself. In terms of pedestrian improvements and considerations, the sidewalks are already on the correct side. The Pleasant Hill Street is steep. However, they do feel that public exposure and the opportunity for eyes on the actual structure at this location are very much a plus and a benefit. On the flip side of that, though, potential threats that they are perceiving is that there is close proximity to the gas station and to Atlanta Street. In the future, if there's any expansion of Atlanta Street, that may be something we have to watch. But on the other side as well, just being in that location where there is a certain amount of traffic that goes past. The next location is Oxbow Road, which again, this location is where the structure is currently being held or stationed. But I will say, though, that regardless of the final location that is selected, the house will have to be moved for development. So regardless of the location, the house will have to be moved. This is proposing a parking lot with a drive that comes off of that existing parking lot on that linear park, as well as emergency vehicle access drive directly off of Oxbow Road. This is the second closest one. It's 0.2 miles. Parking should not be an issue at this location. The spacing will meet all requirements, and approximately 15 spaces can be created. In terms of utilities, sanitary is available. There is no stormwater accessibility. Water and power is available via the street. And this does have the most area available for infiltration, and zoning setbacks are met. Grading on this location just as well, particularly around the driveway. Access grading is a location at this site too. In terms of pedestrian improvements and accessibility, sidewalks are on the correct roadside. However, this site does mean and ask for the largest quantity of sidewalk connection. But because it is along Oxbow Road and the amount of traffic on that road, there should be a good amount of public exposure. Yet they are also raising the point that depending which way you're traveling on Oxbow Road, because of the location where they are suggesting, it may be easy to miss the structure or the site, depending which way you're coming down Oxbow. So the site distance could be a concern, and we would have to consider the signage and directional signage with that. The last location suggested is Oak Street, a conceptual plan based directly off of Waller Park entry. And this is the farthest distance. It's 0.4 miles from the community center. Parking will not be met here necessarily, and there's complications with the fact that it's going to have to be a shared space, shared parking with Waller Park. In terms of utility, sanitary, water, and power are available for tie-in with the existing infrastructure. However, the light pole in that connection will be required to be moved in order to tie in that power. No storm system is available, but the zoning setbacks are met. In terms of grading, grading and walls are required for the building pad. In all the locations, all 4 of the locations, grading is going to be an issue. In terms of pedestrians, sidewalks are going to be on the correct road side of this, but it is a steep grade up to the road. Oak Street is dead end with the park, and there is a consideration of public exposure, but there's also consideration for conflict with park activity and connection with that and how they may impact one another if you're having programs or rental at Doc's Cafe, and how that may impact park activity. So here you see a conceptual cost estimate, and this is included in your report from VHB, part of your package. When you look at the 4 options here, Oxbow Road is the least at $129,474. And then the other 3 options are roughly $130,000, $140,000 plus in addition. So next steps. Staff is recommending that the Pleasant Hill location, either A or B, is selected and chosen, and this is based off of cost and SWOT analysis. And we're asking for further direction to determine the cost of utility tie-in to the existing Oxbow realignment project based off of that Pleasant Hill selection. The cost of that is to be determined, but we will coordinate with RDOT to submit a proposed budget to mayor and council. But we think that this can be done via change order with the existing Oxbow realignment project. The benefit of that is we believe that it will authorize and incorporate sewer and stormwater stub-ins and take advantage of that mobilization for future connection when we do relocate the structure. And it may avoid, and we anticipate that will avoid, negative impact to the broader complete Oxbow realignment project. So just taking advantage of that mobilization is what we're wanting to connect with. We believe the change order is going to be in the ballpark of around $20,000 to $40,000, but well underneath $40,000. And that is what we're asking the direction of the committee tonight. With all that in mind, please keep in mind with future considerations when it comes to Doc's Cafe, that this is not including the conversation of relocation budget, actually moving the structure, nor renovation and any operational planning and how that may be determined in the future, and the overall budget when it comes to renovating the structure itself. So, thank you so much for your time, and I'd just like to stop here for any questions.
Thank you, Dana. Councilmember Hall.
Yes, just 2 questions. The $150,000 that was in there for relocation in the costing, but later you said it didn't include the relocation costs. I'm confused by.
Sure. This cost.
Could you just go back to, let's simplify it. Right now, the time crunch right now is whether or not we locate utilities and allow for it at Pleasant Hill option A or B.
Correct.
If we choose to do that, it's going to cost $20,000 to $30,000.
Yes.
But we need to make that decision soon because of the Oxbow realignment project.
Okay.
So right now, it's just a decision, do we want to locate it at Pleasant Hill or not? Because if we do locate it at Pleasant Hill, they would need transportation needs to do all of the alignment for
So
asphalt.
that's what the additional.
And that's what we're
relocation.
seeing as the opportunity as we reviewed. And they are in approval of Pleasant Hill. They are very much in agreement of that site. They're excited about that particular location, mainly because of that is the closest location to the original site. But I think it's the connection to the heart of the community, but it's also the question of incorporating into the broader story of the historic district and visibility to the community along that Atlanta Street and Oxbow Road. So yes, we have been in conversation with them, and they're looking for the Pleasant Hill option.
Councilmember Wilsey.
Thank you for this presentation. You did an excellent job of summarizing everything and presenting to us all the options, and I can tell there's a lot of work behind it. And I realize you're probably not quite there yet with some idea of the programming and activation of the space that's planned. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, will it be an active building with activities or kind of ongoing, or is it meant to be more of a passive structure?
Sure. Well, there's ongoing conversation, but the intent, and I think the overall community agreement, is they would like to see it be used as a community center that can be used for mixed use for various options. As the historic assets manager and the story of the interpretation and inclusion within that story of the historic district, I very much would like to see it included in programming and getting involved with the community to be able to tell that story. So it will serve both a practical function for the community, but as well as an interpretational function for the community. And that's how the conversation has developed when it comes to that. Now, in terms of the hard details of that renovation and what that looks like, we have not gotten to that part yet. We are just at this point addressing and assessing where do we want to move Doc's Cafe and what are the concerns of each location and what are approximate conceptual estimates for each location. But just to move to that location, to mobilize that site, not actually renovating, preparing the structure, just to mobilize that site.
Councilmember Tyser.
Thank you. When this appeared in the packet, I had an opportunity to go ask a couple of long-term members of the community what their opinion was. My original thought, my original hope, my original bias was that it would go in one of our parks, either at the entrance to Waller, or some have suggested, further into Groveway Park, something like that. Each person I asked was vehement, and I was surprised, I was very surprised that it needed to be as near the original location as possible. And they felt that that was true to history, it was true to culture, and it seemed very important to them. And so my review was very unscientific of two or three people that I know, but I'm glad to hear that your steering committee, what you said your steering committee gave you was exactly what I heard, and it would be very hard for me to support what I think would be better in one of the parks versus what the community who this has such meaning to believes. And so I find myself torn, but wanting to go with the recommendation that you and the steering committee have come up with.
Mayor Henry.
I think that the overlying issue that we need to decide on here is the location of Doc's Cafe, because we will only locate it one time in our lifetimes. It will be sitting there for the next 200 years. hopefully.
Yes.
As will all our historic structures. But I think it's really important that the community, the Pleasant Hill community has bought into this. They're very excited about it. But what I'm even more excited about is what Dina was talking about is us telling the story. So, you know, if you come to visit our historic homes, this is a part of that tour because it's another very important part of our history. And what we have talked about very often with Doc's Cafe, and Pastor Strickland mentioned this to me early on, he said, we don't have any grand structures, but they do have Doc's Cafe. They've also got his mother's home that she has given to the church that was the first church and first school for black children in the city of Roswell. So, and that can be saved and located as well. So the goal here is to present a very honest and equal view of our history, and I think Doc's Cafe and the preservation of that is very important. Now, I have mentioned before that we will get together in the community and raise money for Doc's Cafe. I've got a number of people that are already lined up that are willing to donate time and materials to make the improvements to Doc's Cafe. But we, as a city, need to determine where we're going to locate it. And I personally think the Pleasant Hill site is perfect. We don't have to, and that's what the community feels, we don't have to choose A or B right now, but just in order to stub in the utilities and put the asphalt down, that will save us time and money in the future.
Thank you. Councilmember Judy.
I agree. I've too had multiple conversations in the past week regarding this, and they said if we cannot put it in the exact location, which is now impossible, we want it as close to the site. So I would support that 100% this afternoon.
All right. Any further discussion on this item? Do I have a motion for the location? All right, I have a motion from Mayor Henry for either option A or B, but on that Pleasant Hill side, do I have a second? I have a second from Councilmember Judy. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dana, you and Jeff.
Pleasure.
So item number 13 on the agenda is listed as others, but it is for council members Hall and Palermo, and they are interested in more of a discussion about visitors and the access for the Old Mill Park. So I will turn it over to either council member Hall or Palermo if you want to kick us off.
I'll just start. Thank you for the opportunity. Councilmember Palermo and I together, due to a timing conflict, and then Councilmember Judy at a different time, had an opportunity to meet with the residents at Old Mill Park, at the Mill Village, and discuss Old Mill Park and their concerns. And they gave us, quite an earful, which they followed up with in a email, a summary email of some of the issues that they're seeing. And we wanted to bring this forward to discuss with everybody and find out basically if there's any information on some of the solutions that have been implemented, and also discuss some of the signage that's creating a lot of issues for many of the residents. And I'll turn it over at this point to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's the Mill Village. It's got such a large group of really engaged residents. So really just a big turnout and really just passionate about just really ensuring safety and really quality of life in the area. And so with that, I'm really hoping for a vote on this item regarding two aspects tonight. So one is a big concern that came up was regarding really just the safety and a lot of aspects around swimming. And so that was something that was really a concern. And then after that summary being sent in, and after us looking into that, it's my understanding that this sign went up that does a good job of saying what's allowed and what isn't allowed. The issue is that it's for the first time officially advertising swimming, and that I don't feel is being sensitive or responsive to the needs and and wishes of the residents most affected. And so I really would like to see either the sign taken down or updated. I don't know what, I'll leave it up to staff on what the best solution is. But to have put up a sign advertising swimming when there's all these concerns going on, I just feel it's a little insensitive, and we should really address that. So that's number one that I'd like to discuss and hopefully vote on to really address this need. Number two is not an action like this one. This one's clearly an action that I'm requesting of council to actually update or remove this sign. The other one is more of just some information. What I think, and actually, interestingly enough, over the years, council's discussed, different examples and different times of where perhaps it might be interesting to have more information, or it might be handy. But basically, I'd be curious for staff to provide information, examples, et cetera, of different communities that have resident parking requirements. And what I mean by that is basically has potential certain times or certain areas where the parking is for a local resident. I'm not sure if that's the right solution. I'm not sure if that's a direction we should go in, but I think it is important and valuable just to have more information. So I think just to be able to see of what are different examples of how that works, any information that staff might find interesting or helpful of kind of here's benefits, here's downsides, just something for us to consider long term. And I do feel a place, with looking at this information, a place to consider it, or at least just discuss the pros and cons and really the overall merit, is both the parking lot here as well as the streets, et cetera, that have become certainly overcrowded. And in fact, while we were there were multiple cars speeding down the road right next to a park, a kid's playground, really, a public children's playground, as well as some cars speeding the wrong way down a one-way. And so just want to look at least just making, just really addressing the safety and all that. And what council had discussed in the past was obviously not for this situation or this location, but just discussing, are there certain events, are there certain times, certain locations, et cetera, where it might be helpful to have a resident, parking allowed or something along those lines. So that's just something I'd be looking for. Again, not any decision, not sure what I would support and what I would not support, but just the second part of this vote would just be for staff to provide some information and examples. So those are basically the two requests that I feel really align with what we've heard from so many residents here most affected.
All right, is there any questions to start with? Councilmember Judy?
So I did spend some time down there and met with quite a few of the residents. They were very impressed and thankful for the committee put together to work with the members of the community and staff that had been given time and had many meetings with them as well and listening to their thoughts. So thank you to staff for doing that. I did have a copy of this sign when I went down there. And I showed it to them, and they all, because the committee had it that evening, and nobody said anything about the swimming. Obviously, I think the swimming brings up a really tough conversation on many fronts when it comes to where does National Park Service stop and end in the middle of the stream. How are you going to enforce swimming down there? And if this swimming guy on the sign, and most people that are going down there to go swimming have already made the decision to go down there and go swimming, they're not going to say, oh, I see this guy on the sign, I'm going to go swim. I think there's some things we need to, obviously this is a consideration that I think can be looked at as far as signage goes. One of the main two issues that was brought to my attention while down there, everybody was really positive of where we were going, was the mill attendant, which they would like to see a mill attendant down there more often. I know that Parks and Rec has been looking at putting a mill attendant, and Mr. Leatherman can help us on this down there at times. And also more policing by the park police, and really showing, getting out of the car a little bit more and getting down there and showing that they're in the area to cut down on anything that could be wrong going down there. Like that, I was quite surprised people are bringing full Weber grills down the path and leaving them. Yeah, and leaving them. So I think the takeaway I took from my time down there, which might have been different, was that some more presence by the city in multiple ways would be very well appreciated, and that obviously when you started getting into parking permits and banning people from swimming in rivers and stuff, it gets really tough. So I think that we're doing a good job. I think we need to continue to listen and work with the residents, and I appreciate staff's time.
Mayor Henry.
Oh, yeah, at the mill, yes, ma'am. We have, most of ours are right at the falls. If you go, and it's not usually on the Roswell side, it's on the park side, the state park side. They either slip on the rocks down there at the falls, or if you go above the falls and go down to the national park side, there's some rope swings up there that a lot of them don't really know how to use. So they forget to let go until the wrong time, and that's when we're called. So that's the kind of, and we do go down there quite often. That's a normal visit for us just about every weekend. So as far as the swimming, I've never seen much swimming there when I've been down there. There is a tremendous amount of people that are at the falls at the bottom that are playing in the water and stuff, but I haven't seen a whole lot of swimming down there.
Councilmember Palermo.
And thank you, Chief Burnett. Thank you, Mayor Henry. So with that, Councilman Judy said some things I certainly agree with and some I disagree with. One, first off, I think you bring up some important complexities regarding actual enforcement of swimming, where's the side, and I agree with that completely. That's a much longer discussion and longer term discussion. I think, certainly you could argue that, is that advertisement, is it really getting a lot more people swimming? I think the mayor brings up a good example that it is making me think of somebody that didn't totally plan on it, has a 3-year-old. I think that's actually a very legitimate point. And also, again, I think it's our duty to be responsive to the community. And so if we're hearing that there's concerns around the swimming, I still, whether or not it's an effective advertisement, I feel we don't put up an advertisement. So that's why I definitely I'm hoping this committee supports solving that. And then where I think disagreed was, so the night that we were there was actually a very large gathering, and so it ended up being 38 residents. And we definitely had some discussion on just really the fact that there was disappointment in the process that had happened before, because there wasn't enough involvement and clearly not enough, positions, opinions, et cetera, were gathered, whereas by being able to just really spend less than an hour, it's probably maybe 45 minutes, maybe even less, we were able to get just so many different perspectives to really understand what a lot of the different challenges are. So I think the enforcement, or not the enforcement, I think the presence is certainly helpful. It was something that, that's definitely something that was popular, and I certainly agree with. And then at the same time, there still is the challenge with even with the presence, there still are the speeders, there's still all the different parking challenges, et cetera. So again, am I saying that we need to move forward to have, resident parking or anything like that? No, I'm not at all saying that. All I'm saying is, I think it's completely fair and reasonable to be responsive to the residents and just look at, even just for long term, what could that entail? How do different communities do it? And we might all see, it's not worth the money, the effort, the time, anything like that. But let's at least just see what are different possibilities for the long term.
Councilmember Judy.
I agree. In no way was I saying don't take the swimmer off the sign. I'm just saying that I don't know if taking the swimmer off the sign is going to cut down on the swimming, is what I was trying to say. I think that people go down there there's water and it's in mind. So I don't disagree with taking the swimmer off the sign at all. And looking at options, I think we should look at all options. There's nothing we shouldn't look at here. So I'm not against any of that. I think that it's as long as we continue to listen and I'll go back down there a couple more times and try to meet some more people and see what we can do. I think staff and chief and transportation is doing a good job trying to help work with us here.
So with that, and I'd like to make a motion that I move to direct staff to either remove or update the sign. That's up to them, and also for staff to come forward at a future committee meeting, providing examples of how resident parking is supported, or different examples of how different communities potentially do that. I'd say it's really based for staff to provide. So basically, I've seen communities that have for certain parks or something along those lines, or certain hours, whatever it might be, is resident parking or something along those lines. I've also seen other ones that have streets where it is just resident parking, either whether it's night, whether it's 24 hours. So what I want to see is, and basically my request, if this committee agrees, is thank you for bringing those examples. I was not familiar with those examples, but that's exactly what I'm requesting of staff. If here's different examples, I'll tell you my intent and my ideal would be something where Roswell residents for free get to park in certain areas, whether it's all the time, certain times, et cetera. But again, this is just purely, I want to see examples and just want to see what's a long-term possibility, what isn't. That's really one of the questions. Right, and so that's where, again, this is just purely, I think we should look at all different options. And in reality, maybe it's something where, the cost is not worth it, or it's something where, here's a lot of different benefits where it could be used. But it's basically for staff to look at, here's the different things. Oh, here's one that does it, but it's a sticker, and you have to get it for 50,000 cars and all that. That's just the discussion I'd like us to have at a future committee meeting.
So we have a motion from Councilmember Palermo to.
Wait.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Wilson.
No, thanks. I guess I just have a question about process. I mean, I certainly don't have a problem with removing swimming from the sign, But I'm just curious if that's the right process for this. I mean, do we need to have a vote to direct staff to take a swimmer off? Is that something rec commission needs to talk about? Is that something that we just give guidance to staff and say, hey, we've talked to the community, we've talked among ourselves, and, think that this is the best mission forward? Again, I think it's fine to take it off. I'm just questioning, is this the right process?
I think for excuse me, for the swimming side of it, I think we could probably just take guidance and we could deal with that from the guidance.
Right.
One of the things Councilmember Palermo wanted to be sure that he covered was if he's asking for staff to go out and kind of look at some of these other cities or areas and what they do. Certainly at that point, we're directing staff, and he knows that you need a vote for that. So the signs can be either way. He put it into his motion. I'm going to leave it in the motion, but that motion carries a lot more weight as far as directing staff to take some time to try to go and see what these other cities do. I don't think it'll take a lot of time,
Sure.
but I think it's worth
Right,
the look
again,
at.
I don't have a problem with that. My suggestion is, we have these situations come up all the time, and most of the time, they're just picking up the phone.
Correct.
Making a suggestion, asking a question, so I'm just curious, why.
I think he was looking, it's more for consensus, I think, but since it's in the motion, I don't see an issue with it being in the motion. But yes, you're right.
We'll be seeing a lot more things coming, I'm sure, this way.
Yeah, it can go either way. Mayor Henry?
Whatever the case may be, we've talked, and I know the rec commission has had this conversation over and over and over again, is do we just regulate it to Fulton County cars? Do we regulate it to Roswell cars? How do you put the stickers on? And I know that that's been an ongoing conversation. So when we're talking about the Mill Village, there are two separate things in my mind that are going on here. One are public streets. And if you want to put no parking signs on a public street, that means no parking for anybody. But the other part of this is there's a parking lot down there for the falls. Now, I'm assuming we own that parking lot?
We do.
So we could look at that parking lot and regulate it, but I think it's part of a larger discussion with the rest of our parks. So I'm just throwing that out there. So I see two separate issues with parking. One is parallel parking on the streets, which we could restrict all of that, or we can restrict none of it. But, I'm just not certain how you can let certain people park. So if you come to my house, you couldn't park on my street, but I can. So that's the question I'm asking. So is this a bigger policy issue with the parking? And it's a separate policy issue with street parking, and Chief Conroy can tell you the issues that go along with that. So I'm just asking for clarification.
Councilmember Hall.
And I think this is what the intent is to come up with, to identify all those reasons why you can't, or why you can, or if you do, what you have to do. An idea that comes to, or something I've seen growing up on the East Coast and both on the West Coast, is no beach parking signs. These are public streets, and somehow they put signs that there's no beach parking for people that go to frequent those. I don't know how or why they do that, but it's I guess it's a request to have staff give whatever the plethora of options are. Some of those are just not going to be practical, most likely, but perhaps there'll be a nugget in there that we can use.
Right, because I have seen, so I agree with that completely. And I have seen some cities that will have, in certain neighborhood areas, it will be resident parking only on the street. Again, I'm not saying we should or should not go in that direction. It's just that's why I see it related. I think, so I would like to see from staff the overall whether it's a parking lot for residents only, or it's a street, and maybe we look at it, we say, you know what, neither one we think is a good idea. Maybe we say, you know what, the park one we think is a good idea that we should discuss further, not the street one, or vice versa. But that's what I'm envisioning, just discussion of the overall, which is obviously a long-term discussion, and obviously, but it's also something, even though this is brought up for the Mill Village, I do believe we've had other discussions on potentially, times where this would be helpful in different parts of the city. So that's why I think it's, again, just a bigger policy discussion.
Is there any other questions? Councilmember Zapata.
Yeah, I'm trying to look here because I believe that near the High Museum of Arts in Midtown, you have signs that say residents only. So I think that I was just trying to look on Google to see the street view. I believe that is residents only parking, so you go to see the museum.
So that can be a good example of what we talked about. So is there any other questions? So I have a motion right now from Councilmember Palermo on the floor to either remove or update the signs in regarding to swimming and staff bring back examples of some type of resident parking programs that are already out there. Do I have a second? I have a second from Councilmember Hall. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much for that. So we'll move forward and get that information back as quick as we can. So we're adjourned for this part of the committee, and we have Public Safety, Public Works next.
I didn't know we were having a break. I guess I'll use. Oh, there. Okay.
Yeah, Chief. So I've hiked in that area, obviously, and there's one where the rope swing was kind of cut down, but you can see it was a rope swing. It is literally right over rock. I'm like, what are they thinking? Yeah, or what were they thinking? Yeah. Literally, I think you could not design a more dangerous place for a rope swing for this one that I saw. Right, exactly. And it was such a big rock that you'd have to be really athletic and really coordinated to get off at that exact second. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's where I was on the national park side when I saw the rope swings.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Public Safety and Public Works Committee, regular meeting of July 14th, 2020 to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting of June 9th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? I have a motion from Councilmember Hall. Do I have a second? I have a second from Councilmember Wilsey. All in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. That's unanimous. So the number 2 item on the agenda is the first item for Public Safety Police, and it is consideration of a resolution to accept the FY20 Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Fund Grant application in the amount of $34,459 and approval of a budget amendment of $34,459. I'll turn this over to Chief Conroy.
I need my course on how to operate the electronics. So, good evening. This item is to accept a grant. This council has previously authorized the application for the grant. It's for the Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance, 2020 Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Fund. We were awarded a grant in the amount of $34,459. And in our application, it included also $327 from our budget to purchase PPE and other sanitation equipment. I'll give you a brief rundown. These are monthly. I'll leave the numbers off because we calculated it on a monthly basis. But as we know, the coronavirus is not going away, and we're going to continue needing additional PPE. Some of this we've already purchased. Again, this is our monthly list. Surgical masks, N95 masks, hand sanitizer, sanitation wipes, hand soap refills, hand sanitizer refills, gallons of alcohol that we use to disinfect touch points, and disposable gowns. And we've been successfully awarded this grant, and I'm asking for approval to accept.
Any questions for the chief? We have a motion regarding the request for this grant.
Motion approved.
I have a motion from Councilmember Palermo and a second from Councilmember Zapata. All in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, Chief Conroy. Did I say Chief Grant? No, this grant. Thanks, Chief Conroy.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is for Public Works, item number 3. It is consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to award a contract to Construction 57, Inc. for construction of the Groveway Waterline Replacement Project Phase 2 for $225,455. Mr. Skowski.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we'd like to build a water line. It's a short section along Groveway, vicinity of Forest Street. If you'd like, I can pull up the map and show you. But basically, we've done projects on either side of this section along Myrtle Street through the CDBG program a number of years ago, and also on Groveway and Bush Street right around the Child Development Center. And this is essentially phase 2 of the Groveway project. We designed both sections several years ago, and this will basically complete the loop. We couldn't afford to do the entire project during phase 1, and that was done in conjunction with the road project around the Child Development Center. So if there's any questions, the project was bid. I do want to mention that in reviewing the bids, the responsibility, ability, or capabilities of the lowest bid contractor were called into question. We were not comfortable with their references, and we also found information about them being removed from a project in another jurisdiction. So that's why we are not going with the lowest bidder. We did not feel they were responsible or have the capabilities to do water line projects. So we're going with the second low bidder here, and that's the main issue. It's partially CDBG funded, about $150,000, and the balance is being provided by the water fund. I'd be happy to answer any questions or show you a map if you'd like to look at it in more detail.
Any questions for Mr. Skowski? Do I have a motion for this consideration? Have a motion from Councilmember Wilsey. Motion to approve. Do I have a second? Councilmember Judy. All in favor, raise your hands. And that's unanimous.
If I may, some more apology. The package was quite thick. I didn't intend for you to have to look at the entire invitation to bid. I had submitted about a 6 or 7 page package. If you guys want to see the entire bid package, I didn't think it added much to the explanation, but I think it was added by finance or procurement. So that's the reason for the thickness of the package.
Thank you, Mr. Skowski. Item number 4 is other items. It's a item for Councilmember Palermo. It's regarding the 21st century policing and other national policing discussions. So Councilmember Palermo?
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. So really appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak today. I know that council is very well versed and aware of all this. And at the same time, I feel at the request of residents and also inspired by the great discussion the chief had at the Solidarity March, I just feel it's an important discussion that we have. You know, as this year's public safety liaison, I've been really impressed to learn about so many of the policies within our department, and I truly believe that our department is ahead of the curve. So just really appreciative of Chief Conroy and just the department, what I'm seeing in 2020. So you know, this is just a chance again. You know, I'm bringing up, and I believe this entire council is just proud and appreciative of all the work, of all the careful planning, and with that, I want to make sure we're having this open discussion to make sure there's just such confidence and transparency. And it's actually one of the things I'll get into that I think is a benefit of what our department is doing in the community. So I always want to hear others' perspectives, whether that's council members and really the entire community. I always want to hear different perspectives and learn more. But I felt it's just important that I'm walking through a lot of the things that are kind of being discussed out there, and frankly why I feel that with Roswell being ahead of the curve, that it's not luck. It seems to me that it really is careful planning, and so and I hope the community will be confident in that. And I'll just walk through a number of items around that. So first most and probably the most important is 21st century policing. So that's something that I know this council certainly heard a lot from our chief. So I know we're all well versed in it, but I do just want to walk through some aspects of it. You know, truth be told, I'm always looking to learn more. I was not very familiar with it until we were looking at Chief's resume and all that aspect. So that's where I got the first chance to see it and certainly learn more. And then obviously with everything going on, learned a lot more about it this year. So what's important to understand as I walk through this sets up so many different aspects on what gives me the confidence that I see is, so first of all, this was done from a task force. It was a presidential task force under President Obama, and basically it involved members of law enforcement, academia, the public, community leaders, both from a task force as well as the fact that they brought on, I think it was about 140 witnesses that were included in the discussion, and something that I want to, as I want to really call out is they insisted that 21st century policing has to be anchored in measurable and behavioral improvements, not in just abstract theories around policing. So there's a lot of research and a lot of details around it to make sure that it really was something that was actionable. And obviously under Chief Conroy's leadership is something that his department has adopted. So first off, there's really the 6 pillars. And so building trust and legitimacy. And this is done through procedural justice, transparency, accountability, and just and really honest recognition of past and present obstacles. And that's where I actually feel this discussion, which again was brought on by really the request of residents with some emails, some calls. But I actually, as I looked at this more and learned more, seeing that I actually see this just as an example that we don't have our head in the sand. We're all, you know, in my opinion, we're all conscious of this, and it's an important discussion. Second pillar, just policy and oversight, just making sure that there's actual comprehensive and responsible policies on really all those important key topics. And I'm obviously, given the very high level, it would probably be 3 days of speaking to really get in through all these details, but just knowing that there's actual policies and details and processes and procedures behind all of this. There's just the technology and social media aspect. And around that, there's social media, which obviously Roswell has that presence, often out there with the community, and just seeing a lot of stuff, whether it's important news information of an event going on that we should all be aware of, as well as just some of those feel-good stories, and just really making sure to have that presence in the community. And then, of course, technology. You know, I'm really proud that back in, I think it was 2016, we had the opportunity to vote in the first body cameras, and that's something that's obviously been continuing to expand and grow, and just the need to make sure that it's all with local needs, privacy, assessments, and monitoring for all those different aspects. Fourth one, community policing and crime reduction. Really just making sure that there's the implementation of the policies that support community-based partnerships in the reduction of crime. And so I think what you'll see, and hopefully the community, as they share their perspective, they are noticing this, that there is that community outreach, which I definitely could name a number of examples, and I'm sure this mayor and council could as well. Training and education. This one's crucial, and actually you'll see me bring up again later on, but just making sure that it's emphasized the importance of that high quality and effective training and education, and through partnerships as well as local and national training facilities. And then the sixth and final pillar, really just officer wellness and safety. I think we all understand how important and crucial that is. It's a two-way street, and really just making sure that we're endorsing practices that support officer wellness and safety, and through reevaluation of just a number of different aspects, as well as data collection and analysis, and making sure we're doing all we can to prevent officer injuries, et cetera. Two other things that are within here that I just want to mention as well is procedural justice. So it's just the fact that what's implemented under adopting this policy is very clear processes on resolving disputes, and also that involves clear processes on investigating police conduct. So those are all aspects under procedural justice. And then another thing I do want to call out regarding just really fair and impartial policing. And a part of this is the fact that really just exploring implicit bias and how it impacts policing. And so just really the key is, helping officers identify their own implicit biases and providing them with really skills to reduce and manage implicit biases. Obviously, it's a long journey, and it's not that just one single session is going to do it. But what I'm confident in, it seems to me that our police department is just so far ahead of so many other departments I've read about, both in the region and in the nation. And I think this is a big example why. And again, just the fact that really it's important. In 2017, every single officer had completed this training, and really there's a lot of discussion on the fact that we've got some great new recruits, and making sure that we're gonna be supporting our police department with the right funding, et cetera, to make sure they're all getting the training they need. And so with that, I say that first because I think that truly is really the most important guiding aspect here. It's something that has been done with so many different stakeholders with different perspectives, and again, a lot of just research and understanding and all the details on the real life, real type examples to make sure that it is, not just abstract. So with that, I want to actually move on and just talk about some other aspects where, some of them we've certainly seen. I certainly want to open this up to any comments, anything.
My mom's having surgery tomorrow.
Oh, my goodness.
She's going to bed early tonight, so no disrespect. I think, Chief, you're doing a great job, but
So I pray for your mom, and thank you for letting us know, and appreciate the support. So, please, yeah.
The training, you mentioned training, and you mentioned, I believe, internal affairs.
Yep.
So those are two things I don't know if you're going to explain more of that, or something that we can find out more later. But the population of those two specific topics are of high concern and need for high interest.
Sure. Yeah. So what I'll just at a high level address is absolutely our department is doing the training. And there's that, what I'd encourage is perhaps if the chief could perhaps whether it be a later committee meeting or perhaps it's an email, just maybe giving a description or explanation around the details of the training. Is that something that could work for? Excellent. And so without a doubt, that training is occurring or has occurred and needs to continue to be a priority. And we need to support our police department, make sure we're funding and making sure that there's the funds available for that training. And then regarding internal affairs, currently there's three officers that have a part of their responsibilities being internal affairs. So there is the unfunded request to have one single full-time person, but that's again up to this mayor and council. And so I think it's something we certainly should be looking at in the future. But again, today there absolutely is the internal affairs role within three officers performing those duties. So it's part-time in the sense that they're full-time officers, but it's internal affairs is not 100% of their duties. Right, exactly. So we've covered again just the overlaying 21st century policing, which again I think is really important and definitely encourage for the individuals listening to really even read up a little more on those details. But now I want to get into some other aspects that we certainly got some questions on, and we've been seeing and hearing a lot of discussions. And one of them, it's something that got some emails and heard from some residents wanting to talk about. In my research, I wasn't able to see just really the background, any actual research or anything around it. And what it ended up being is something where I think we look at it at a high level. Absolutely, I think if any of us look at it at a high level, it seems like it makes perfect sense. But then want to discuss on just some aspects where there are some exceptions and that I think absolutely makes sense. But I'll walk through that. And again, I think just knowing that there's the overlying 21st century policing, I think is helpful for setting up a lot of those aspects. So this one right here, it's called the 8 Can't Wait. And again, it's something where not able to understand kind of where it's coming from or anything like that, but nonetheless, we've had a number of residents just wondering, for those 8 things, where do we stand? And I think that's a reasonable question, and I'll just kind of talk through that. So the first one is banning chokeholds and strangleholds. This is something that absolutely the Roswell Department has banned. So this is something that is absolutely not authorized in non-deadly use of force situations. So that's something that absolutely is being followed. Number 2 is actually, from my interpretation, seems like really a real important one to walk through because I think it actually addresses other ones, which is required de-escalation. So the second one on this list is required de-escalation. That is something that is under the rules of the Roswell Police Department, and in 2 different ways too. So there's actual training, and this goes back to the training. There's actual instruction on how that's done. And also, it's a requirement as well. So it's my understanding that there's the required de-escalation in all types of situations. And let me just read the exact things in this thing. It goes: require officers to de-escalate situations where possible by communicating with subjects, maintaining distance, and otherwise limiting the need to use force. So it even specifically mentions, so require officers to de-escalate situations where possible. And absolutely, that's something that our department's doing. And again, I want to bring that up because I think that's really relevant for some later ones. And so one of them is the require warning before shooting. So really, as an important reminder, at all times, our officers are required to de-escalate. And then at the same time, again, looking at, just what it's my interpretation that to be following each of these, there has to be no exceptions. And here's an exception with that one. If an officer is being shot at and their life is a danger, there's not the requirement to warn before shooting. So that's where, if we're looking at just purely either we 100% follow it or do not, that's an example of an exception right there. But I think it's really important to go back to we require de-escalation. Similar, number 4, requires exhaust all alternatives before shooting. So want to remind you again, de-escalation is required. So I think you can kind of see the similarities there. It mentions require officers to de-escalate situations where possible. That we're fully policing. If if we're to have a extremely literal interpretation of this, then it basically means if a criminal is shooting, then an alternative before shooting is, yelling, trying to stop, but then also using a baton, using a taser, then going to gun. And basically, again, if lives are in danger, then without a doubt, at all times, no matter what, de-escalation is required. But it's just with that literal interpretation there. That's where I want to just share that potential exception. Duty to intervene. This is one that obviously we've all seen, heard a lot about in the news. This is one that absolutely Roswell has, and with that, it's specifically in the handbook and the responsibility. When an employee becomes aware of possible misconduct, so not even excessive force. So this is just saying requires to intervene and stop excessive force, but it specifically becomes aware of possible misconduct, which obviously would include excessive force. Then the employee shall immediately report the misconduct to a supervisor and/or the officer of professional standards, the chief of police or City of Roswell Human Resources. So this is all in there, and so that's something right there without exception. So number 6, the ban shooting at moving vehicles. Again, want to go back to de-escalation. At all times, they're required to de-escalate. And if a moving vehicle is getting away with hypothetically they've stolen something, that there would not be the life endangerment to be able to shoot or anything like that. But again, if we're looking at this completely literally, then a drive-by shooting. There's a moving car that has people shooting that are an absolute danger, and so that is an exception there. Require use of force continuum. This is actually really just pretty identical to the requires exhaust all alternatives before shooting. So there's been writing and a lot of discussion, et cetera, around force continuum. It's what are the severities of the potential forces, and again, that's the risk. If you have a criminal shooting, then there's not going to be to use a taser before using the gun. So that's an exception. But again, I think so crucial that under all the detailed policies under the 21st century policing, as well as the required de-escalation, that whenever possible, that is de-escalated. And then lastly, the require comprehensive reporting. And yes, this is something that we absolutely do. And something I'll call out is it says requires officers to report each time they use force or threaten to use force against civilians. So the way ours works is it includes, because it's not only when a gun is actually fired, it's even when a gun is pointed at someone. That is something that we do require comprehensive reporting on. Not all departments in the area do that, but that is something that we do. And again, I think it's an example of a lot more details around the whole setup of the 21st century policing. And so that's the item on the 8 can't wait. And certainly, as we walk through it, it could be, certainly some thinking, why even bother going through it? You shouldn't discuss it. Again, I think it's important, going back to the 21st century policing, of making sure that we're building trust and legitimacy. I don't want it to seem like we have our heads in the sand. And frankly, I feel we have nothing to hide. I'm always welcome to and always want to hear more, different perspectives, and certainly always hope to and learn more. But from everything I've looked at, from reading through 21st century policing, from trying to understand kind of the background and trying to understand more details here, it just seems to me that again, I feel our police department is really ahead of other departments in the region and probably even the country. And speaking of that, let's go through just some other aspects that we certainly hear at the national discussion. So you certainly hear concerns and risks regarding police unions when you have an officer that has, perhaps used excessive force, for an example. Well, that's not a situation in Roswell, so that's not an example. And we have had some police officers that have been fired and experienced that. And that's where I really stand by that 99% of our police department. They're all just so hardworking, wanting to do nothing but protect and serve, and really appreciative of their service and their dedication. So I mentioned police unions, police personnel files. So that's something that's coming up. So that's actually something you'll hear on the national news. I'm talking about wanting to change laws and really push to be able to get a police officer's personnel files. That's something that anybody can get. And actually, when I was mentioning to one of the residents, they said, oh, well, that's good. I guess that's really good that because you're a city council member, you can get that. I said, no. Any resident can get that. So that's something, again, you might hear about on the news, and therefore you might have some residents asking about, but that's something that's fully available to all residents. And then one of the questions, and just something to bring up regarding body cameras. So unfortunately, we have this situation where it made national news, so everyone should be aware that absolutely Roswell does have body cameras. And I'm really proud that we got to support that. I think it was back in 2016. So we do have body cameras. And then speaking of body camera policy, just so everybody's aware of what that looks like and how that works, is, obviously they were implemented to improve trust and transparency. And here's actually the interesting aspect too. So in fact, officers are to activate their cameras during any citizen encounters. And that's an item where I actually even, was honest, I told the chief I kind of disagreed, but he's on the side of being more cautious than less, in which case, as long as you're more cautious, my disagreement is nothing that's important or anything like that. I felt certainly anytime there's an issue, there's an escalation, anything like that, I said, really, even if somebody's just asking for directions, they're just saying, oh, excuse me, can you point me to City Hall? And officially, it sounds like the chief's policy is that even in that type of encounter. But the key is, especially if there's any issue, anything where there's an event and the body camera was off, that is a violation, and that is something that certainly is not something that's just allowable. So that's something that certainly, and again, going back to the 21st century policing, there's specific rules, processes, all the stuff around that from everything that I've been hearing since we adopted this. So that's on the body cameras policy. Oh, and an important thing to know as well, and I believe we actually voted on this spend. I forget when it was, but basically it's just been officially implemented that automatically the camera activates if the officer's firearm is unholstered. So that's I think great technology and something that this mayor and council paid for and has been implemented. Sure, and they're right, and so there is a there is a policy on that, so that can be another follow-up to provide. And then lastly, which I think is really important, again, goes back to the building trust and legitimacy through really just the transparency, accountability, et cetera, is documentation. So something that the chief did, which Councilman Zapata, you may or may not be aware of, but given your philosophy, as we discussed earlier, you always preferred more information than less. So the chief really made the request to say, put the policy out there, just automatically, no need to do an open records request, just put it out there online. And I think the assumption was, okay, so we're talking 5 pages, 10 pages, how many pages is that?
It's about 800.
Yeah, but so that's fully out there for anybody to be able to access, no need to do an open records request or anything like that. And
Can you search by keywords or any search engine?
is it it's a PDF, so you could do control F. Yep, on the keyword. And then also, and this is something that's also relevant in what we've been hearing and just the national discussion and everything else is the National Use of Force Data Collection Project. So not every department participates in that. Roswell Police Department does participate in the National Use of Force of Data Collection Project. So with that, those were the things that were just probably about half of them or so, maybe more, were questions I was hearing from residents. Some other ones I just felt relevant given the national discussion. Again, certainly open and supportive of having a conversation with anyone that and anyone that has additional questions and wants to learn more and has different perspectives. But again, that's why I talk so much, and I believe this entire mayor and council talks so much of our strong support and really pride in our police department. And so as the mayor said, which I 100% agree with and support, obviously with anything, there's always an opportunity for improvement. And the great thing is that through these specific careful planning, the police department is always looking for that improvement, while also I stand by for all these different reasons ahead of the curve. So that's why I just felt it was important to have this discussion, and some residents that requested it said they weren't going to watch live, but they're going to certainly watch the recording tonight. But I really appreciate the time. I appreciate everything that the chief and the entire department's doing, and I certainly open it up for any questions or comments from the chief or the mayor or council.
Does committee have any further questions or comments?
I just want to say thank you so much for the initiative, information aspect. I've been asked for so many residents about how is the police acting, what is the policy, what the council and mayor are doing in this respect. So this item is very informational, and I can refer everybody to get to this public video and audio. So I really appreciate your initiative to bring this information to the council.
I appreciate that. If they have any different perspectives or different thoughts, I always want to hear it and just make sure we're always as informed and hearing so much from the community.
Thank you very much for the overview, and just want to say thanks to the chief and to the department for all the work that you're doing, and especially for, all the work. I think we really got a head start on this when we did the audit of the department a couple of years ago, and I think that helped us really get some things, in order, and then bringing on Chief Conroy and implementing the 21st century guidelines. So very proud of our department and the work that they're doing.
Yes, please pass that along to the entire team, how very, very grateful we are for you and everybody.
Very nice item, and we're adjourned.